are in that vein of, the biker, the cowboy, or
Of being a man.
of being a man, and it made me wonder.
What happens when Hollywood's most legendary cowboy decides he's had enough, not of acting, but of the actors themselves? Sam Elliott, the voice, the mustache, the myth, has quietly blacklisted some of the biggest names in the industry, not out of ego. Sam Elliott, the gravel voice symbol of American grit, has long been known for his silent strength and no-nonsense screen presence. At 80, he's finally broken his cowboy cool silence, naming 7 actors and 1 director he had profound issues with, each for their own reasons. These aren't wild feuds filled with drama and scandal, but rather deep-seated clashes of values, styles, and philosophies. To Elliott, acting has always been more than a job. It's a sacred craft that demands honesty, restraint, and earned authenticity. And when others stray from that code, he doesn't stay silent. First on the list is Benedict Cumberbatch, the British actor whose performance in The Power of the Dog sparked Elliott's fiercest critique. When Elliott saw Jane Campion's Oscar-winning Western, he didn't just disagree with its slow, art house sensibility. He took it personally. On a podcast, Elliott dismissed the film as pretentious and disconnected from the harsh, silent reality of the true American West. But it wasn't just the film's pacing or themes that bothered him. It was Cumberbatch himself. Elliott tore into the actor portrayal as stiff and prissy, questioning what a Brit could possibly understand about cowboy culture. He saw the performance as costume, not character, more like cosplay than conviction. While Cumberbatch had immersed himself in ranch life to prepare for the role, even learning real ranch work and staying in character off-camera, Elliott believed no amount of research could compensate for what he considered a fundamental cultural disconnect. The backlash was swift, with critics accusing Elliott of being out of touch and gatekeeping a genre that modern filmmakers are reinterpreting through more inclusive and emotionally complex lenses. But Elliott stood firm. For him, this wasn't about masculinity or innovation. It was about respecting the truth of a life few understand. And The Power of the Dog, in his view, broke that truth apart under the weight of ignorance, not insight. Next up is Nicolas Cage, whose theatrical, explosive style of acting clashes directly with Elliott's belief in subtlety and internal strength. To Elliott, true performance is in the silences, the pauses, and the understated expressions that invite audiences to feel rather than be told. So Cage's wild, unpredictable energy never resonated. Even when they appeared together in Ghost Rider, their chemistry stayed confined to the screen. Off camera, Elliott remained distant and unimpressed. Though he never openly feuded with Cage, he often spoke in broad terms about actors who hijack scenes with ego and noise, those who, in his words, are more firework than flame. Cage's method of commanding attention fell hollow to Elliott, who believed that acting should never scream for recognition. Cage's Oscar and fame didn't move him. He saw them as signs of a shifting industry that had traded depth for spectacle. He wasn't bitter, just anchored in an older, quieter code that Cage violated with every manic performance. Kevin Costner, despite sharing Elliott's cowboy image, drew criticism of a different kind. To many, Costner's roles in films like Wyatt Earp and shows like Yellowstone seemed like natural extensions of Western heritage. But to Elliott, it all felt too polished, too staged, too clean. Costner, in Elliott's view, played cowboys like a model in a photo shoot. Boots that never got dirty, lines that sounded rehearsed, and a cowboy aesthetic without the accompanying grit. Elliott believed Costner was more concerned with image than authenticity. Even when offered a role in Yellowstone, Elliott turned it down cold, calling the series a soap opera in a cowboy hat. He didn't dislike Costner as a person. There was no animosity or tabloid-worthy tension. It was about principle. Elliott felt that Costner symbolized a version of the West that betrayed its roots, dressing it up with high drama and soft lighting, while forgetting the silence, struggle, and unglamorous toil that defines true Western life. For Elliott, that version of storytelling cheapened the genre he revered. When it comes to Jared Leto, the divide was even more philosophical. Elliott has never tolerated what he sees as pretension in the industry. Actors who confuse spectacle for sincerity and method stunts for meaning. Leto's infamous antics, from sending rats to co-stars on Suicide Squad to living in character for months, struck Elliott as more carnival than craft. He saw Leto as a headline chaser, not a disciplined artist. Though the two never shared a set, Elliott was once loosely attached to a project that later reshaped itself around Leto. And upon learning that, he quietly walked away. He didn't stage a public protest. He simply withdrew. To Elliott, acting is a private process, not a public performance. Leto's approach, in contrast, represented everything Elliott feared Hollywood had become. A circus of egos, attention seekers, and superficial performances. It wasn't about age or generation. It was about integrity. And Leto, with all his Oscars and eccentricities, stood as a symbol of the industry's eroding standards. Perhaps the most surprising name on Elliott's list is Ashton Kutcher, with whom he worked on the Netflix sitcom The Ranch. At first glance, the pairing seemed like a smart blend of old and new, a seasoned legend alongside a modern TV star. But behind the scenes, the relationship was tense. Though Elliott remained professional, delivering his signature gravitas, there was a clear disconnect. Kutcher, despite being friendly and eager to learn, came from a different world. A world of sitcom fame, tech investments, and fast celebrity. To Elliott, Kutcher represented a new Hollywood that valued charisma over craftsmanship. While Kutcher publicly praised Elliott and called him a mentor, Elliott reportedly once remarked, "He's a decent guy, but no real actor." That wasn't personal. It was his honest assessment of a system that now rewards presence over preparation. For Elliott, acting isn't about catching eyes or cracking jokes. It's about carrying truth, something he felt Kutcher never fully grasped. The conflict with Jane Campion, director of The Power of the Dog, is the most public and layered. After Elliott's blistering critique of her film, Campion fired back during her Directors Guild Awards acceptance speech, calling Elliott a little bit of a stopping short of a full insult, but leaving nothing to interpretation. She challenged his authority on cowboy culture, declaring, "He's not a cowboy, he's an actor," a line that pierced straight through Elliott's rugged identity. For Campion, Elliott's comments were not only outdated, they were sexist, elitist, and emblematic of a narrow view that tries to control who gets to tell which stories. She accused him of trying to gatekeep the genre and resist evolving narratives that explore masculinity in deeper, more inclusive ways. To Elliott, however, it wasn't about who told the story. It was about how. He believed The Power of the Dog lacked lived authenticity and romanticized the aesthetic of the West while missing its hard truths. He never publicly responded to Campion's remarks, but insiders say he was unmoved. He wasn't trying to dominate the genre. He was trying to protect it from becoming unrecognizable. The final and perhaps most heartbreaking name on the list is Jeff Bridges. Once considered a kindred spirit, Bridges shared Elliott's deep, soulful energy on screen. Their work together in The Big Lebowski was iconic, and for years, they were seen as two actors cut from the same cloth, stoic, sincere, and grounded. But after Bridges won his Oscar for Crazy Heart, something changed. According to those close to Elliott, he sensed a shift in Bridges. More media polished, more elusive, more aware of a celebrity. It wasn't dramatic or scandalous, but it was enough to create distance. Elliott once said cryptically, "Some folks change. Others just show who they always were," a line widely believed to refer to Bridges. The absence of public support, premieres, and friendly nods between the two grew conspicuous over the years. There was no fight, no betrayal, just a slow, quiet drift that Elliott felt deeply. For a man who values loyalty above almost anything, that kind of distance wasn't something to rage over. It was something to mourn. For Sam Elliott, every name he's mentioned and every conflict he's outlined reveals a larger battle line drawn between two worlds. The world he reveres and the world that has emerged around him. It's not a question of personal animosity, but of absolute principle. A world defined by silence versus spectacle, authenticity versus artifice, lived experience versus polished image, and above all, by the invisible code of integrity Elliott holds dear. And so, with Benedict Cumberbatch, Nicolas Cage, Kevin Costner, Jared Leto, Ashton Kutcher, Jane Campion, and Jeff Bridges, he has quietly but firmly declared where he stands. Elliott's criticism of The Power of the Dog was more than just another film review. It was a statement of personal conviction, far from the mild praise or protected diplomacy often found in Hollywood commentary. Elliott's tone on the podcast was direct. The film misrepresented the American West at its core. He objected not only to its atmospheric, slow burn pacing, but to the aesthetic choices that felt staged. Cumberbatch, embodying the central role, became the lightning rod for Elliott's disdain. To him, the British actor's posture, clipped speech, and polished demeanor turned something elemental, cowboy hardship, into something fashioned and brittle. This was the moment when Elliott's critique became personal and polarizing. Some saw him as a gatekeeper of authenticity, unwilling to accept modern reinterpretations. Others branded him a hero for passionately defending the roots of a genre he embodied. Either way, the oil and water clash between old-school Western grit and contemporary cinematic sensibilities turned into more than disagreement. It became a wedge between what Elliott felt the genre once stood for and where it was now heading. Cumberbatch, though having invested in ranching skills and stayed in character off-camera, drew heat not just for his portrayal, but for what he symbolized, a version of masculinity unmoored from the lived, weather-worn life of the cowboy. Elliott, himself raised in ranch tradition, felt this wasn't an acting performance. It was a role unearned, inauthentic, and emblematic of Hollywood's gloss over hardship. Sam Elliott's philosophy of acting is rooted in subtlety, the awareness that true emotional power is often found in the quiet, buried beneath restraint. It's here that he parts ways with Nicolas Cage, a performer who became famous for tapping into the electric edges of emotion, embracing wild energy, and pressing all the dramatic buttons at once. Meeting each other on screen in Ghost Rider, the difference in their methods was stark. Elliott's measured economy versus Cage's honed theatricality. Off camera, Elliott's polite detachment was telling. He didn't wage a feud, but he voiced a philosophy. The loudest actor is often the weakest storyteller. Cage's style, full of high-wire intensity, never struck him as grounded. For Elliott, Cage's performances rang hollow, impressive for their flair, but lacking true emotional anchoring. Even Cage's big wins and frequent praise couldn't shift Elliott's stance. To him, those accolades weren't proof of greatness. They were signs of a shift in taste. A shift from introspection to ostentation, from soul-searching to showboating. In Elliott's code, actors deserve to disappear into their roles, not call attention to themselves through eccentric displays or crafted personas. Cage, deliberately or not, exemplified everything Elliott believed acting shouldn't be. Kevin Costner's involvement in Western projects like Wyatt Earp and especially Yellowstone marked him as a contemporary cowboy icon. But for Elliott, these are rough facades, front porches dressed up for tours, not actual homesteads. Elliott saw Costner's work as beautifully photographed, but ultimately sterile, like a fashion shoot with dusty boots. The grit, sweat, and humility that Elliott felt defined the real West were absent. Costner's ranchers wore designer silhouettes. Their stories were polished narratives meant to entertain, not to evoke real hardship. When offered cameo on Yellowstone, Elliott declined. He famously dismissed it as a soap opera in boots. That nickname wasn't meant as insult to Costner himself, but to the imagination of a Western that Elliott could not respect. His refusal said volumes. Loyalty to his principles was stronger than any paycheck or association. Jared Leto represents the opposite extreme of Elliott's quiet intensity. He brings a spotlight to every aspect of performance, inside and outside filming. He made headlines for sending rats to co-stars, for radical method transformations, and for his penchant for producing sensational stories about his commitment. Elliott saw this as his ideal of authenticity turned upside down. It wasn't about truth, but self-promotion. He viewed Leto's techniques as a carnival, a spectacle designed to generate buzz rather than enrich character. It wasn't jealousy or envy, it was disappointment. To Elliott, acting needs no theatrics off camera. It needed truth on screen. When Leto became part of script Elliott had left behind, the choice was simple. He walked away in quiet protest. He didn't create headlines. He didn't issue press releases. He just removed himself. That silent refusal spoke louder than any interview or public statement ever could. In The Ranch, movies might pair them as a meeting of legacies. But to Elliott, the set was a reminder of shifting tides. Ashton Kutcher, affable and curious, represented Hollywood's tech-tinted, fame-obsessed new guard. Elliott admired Kutcher's professionalism, but found the newcomer lacking in raw storytelling energy. On set, Elliott reportedly referred to Kutcher as a decent guy, but no real actor, A harsh assessment, perhaps, but not personal. Rather, it reflected Elliott's disapproval of the system he felt spoke louder than it listened and built public personas more carefully than characters. Elliott didn't lash out. He didn't critique favorites on talk shows. He simply lived his standards, tone by tone, quiet, deliberate, refusing to dilute the craft of acting into a marketplace. Jane Campion's public firing back at Elliott elevated the conflict into cultural symbolism. She used her platform at the Directors Guild Awards to suggest Elliott's remarks came from a place of province and prejudice. He's not a cowboy, he's an actor, she said. She accused him of sexism, of guarding the genre like a closed club, of being unwilling to accept reinterpretations of masculinity. She labeled his comments as not just misguided, but as cartoons of his own fears about what Western storytelling could become. Elliott didn't respond with tweets or rebuttals. Rather, he stuck to what he knows: the land, the work, the unyielding control of silence. He may not have addressed her specifically, but he stands by his critique of the power of the dog. For Elliott, letting the genre drift into abstraction isn't evolution, it's erasure. If the others on Elliott's list fuel headlines, then Jeff Bridges represents a quieter heartbreak. Once reliable, once intimately aligned. Their friendship now feels like a fading star in a dusted sky. Bridges shared Elliott's energy, especially in The Big Lebowski, but after his Oscar win for Crazy Heart, Bridges began ascending Hollywood heights that Elliott felt detached from. There was no betrayal, no scandal. It was a slow unraveling. Now, the silence between them is the loudest noise. No red carpet embraces, no supportive nod from Elliott during award season, no more shared moments. That's what hurts Elliott most. Not that Bridges changed, but that his own code said he would always honor someone reflective of his values. Bridges moved up, and Elliott couldn't follow without compromising what he believed in. Understanding Elliott's grievances means understanding his worldview. The Western isn't entertainment, it's ethical. Acting isn't performance, it's testament. Awards and fame may shine, but only grace earned in silence endures. He doesn't attack for sensationalism. He stands firm because there is a code, one of humility, restraint, lived truth, internal landscape, and invisible alignment. When modern Hollywood demands spectacle, when narratives substitute grit for gloss, and when legacy is shaped by headlines rather than humility, Elliott will stand up quietly, defiantly, to confront it. His list reflects not hatred for these actors, but heartbreak, hurt that the world he takes so seriously no longer looks the way he believes it should. That a Brit's cowboy might replace a man who was born and bred into it. That method stories overshadow melodies and whispers. That soap opera ambitions overshadow the silent poetry of the frontier. That spectacles overtake subtlety. That sitcom shine eclipses lived darkness. That awards can drift men from the ground beneath them, leaving the groundless men who stay behind. Sam Elliott's legacy isn't built on his anger, but on the authenticity it protects. To his mind, the Western isn't a costume. It's a backbone. Acting isn't an image. It's an experience. And the best performances aren't the loudest. They're the most lived. He's not attacking individuals. He's defending a worldview. His criticisms aren't mean, they're moral. His silence isn't empty. It's a testament. And his refusal to compromise isn't stubborn. It's sacred. In a world that rewards flash over foundation, he remains a sentinel to the quiet force of integrity. When he names names, Cumberbatch, Cage, Costner, Leto, Kutcher, Campion, Bridges, it isn't spite. It's signal. A warning that even as Hollywood evolves, there's a living pulse beneath it that demands respect. A pulse rooted in earth, weather, routine, and the land. We might disagree with how he chooses to express himself. We might find some of his judgments harsh or outdated. But there's beauty in power, in footnotes, in pauses, in what isn't said. And at 80, Sam Elliott still believes that what you don't say often matters most, especially to those who spent a lifetime listening. In the end, Sam Elliott's critiques don't come from a place of ego or resentment. They come from profound loyalty to a way of life, both on screen and off, that he spent a lifetime defending. He isn't attacking these actors and directors for fame or out of bitterness. He's holding a line. In a world where louder is often mistaken for better, where shock replaces substance, and where acting becomes performance art rather than personal truth, Elliott stands as a last sentinel. To him, the Western isn't a genre, it's a philosophy. It's built on silence, struggle, grit, and unspoken rules. It's not meant to be performed. It's meant to be understood. And for anyone who misunderstands or misrepresents that code, whether it's with polished boots, over-the-top theatrics, or Instagram-fueled careers, Sam Elliott won't stay silent. Not out of spite, but out of respect for craft he calls sacred. In today's Hollywood, that kind of integrity may be rare. But in Elliott's world, it's non-negotiable. If stories like this resonate with you, ones that peel back the polish and get to the human heart of Hollywood, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories that don't need special effects to hit hard.